Everyone, in this video I would focus on explaining all that you need to write chapter 3 of research work. Okay, chapter 3. Now, in most academic work or project works or proposals, chapter 3 focus on the research methodology. Chapter 3 focus on the research methodology. Okay, so in this video I'll try to explain all the areas that you need to cover under your research methodology. Okay, so in the chapter 3 of most academic project works or proposals, you need to focus or you need to detail your research design. Okay, you need to also detail your study area. So you would cover the research design, you would cover the study area, you would cover the study site, you would cover the target population or study population, you would cover the sample size or the sample size determination. You would also cover what we call the data collection tool. You'd also have to cover the data collection procedure. The data collection tool is the same as the data collection instrument. You would also cover the data collection procedure. You would cover the sampling method or the sampling procedure. You'd cover validity and reliability of the data collection instrument. You'd cover data analysis technique or data analysis procedure. You would also cover ethical considerations. Okay, great. So in a typical academic project work or proposal, these are the areas that you need to cover under the methodology. In this video, we would go through and discuss all these areas, okay, that you need to cover in a typical methodology section of a proposal or academic project work. Now, one key thing you need to remember is that in writing the methodology section of a proposal, you do not use past tense. Okay, using past tense would mean that the study has been conducted already. Okay, however, if you are writing an academic project for an actual project work, that is after your proposal have been approved, okay, then you are going to use a past tense. Okay, so one key thing before we take off is that in writing the methodology section, the chapter 3 of a proposal, do not use past tense. Do not use past tense. This is a common mistake most students commit or most writers commit when they are writing the methodology section of a proposal. Okay, and some writers also commit mistake when writing the methodology section of the actual project work. Okay, in the actual project work, that is when you have to use past tense when writing the methodology section. Okay, great. Now we will start with the research design. Okay, Okay, now, like we've discussed previously, research design is the conceptual backbone within which the research is conducted. It comprises the blueprint or the roadmap for collection, measurement, and analysis of data. Okay, so the entire research that you are going to do, you realize that the focus is for you to be able to find answers to the questions you asked in the introductory chapter, the research questions. Now, the procedures and the systems, the strategies that you are going to use in order to collect data or information to answer those research questions you asked in the introductory chapter, that is what we call research design. Now, in writing an academic project work or a proposal, okay, the research design section, this is how you go about it. Okay, so in the research design, first of all, you have to even define what research design actually means. Give a good definition of research design. Okay, good. You define what research design means. Okay, you can get a good definition from any good research method textbook or a handout, okay, and reference appropriately. So you define research design. Okay, then you even have to, give a sentence that at least details the importance or the relevance of research design. Okay, then you now state. So after defining research design, the next thing you are going to do is you now state the design that you are using. So for example, if for those who will be doing or writing quantitative studies, you can go like, this study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design. Okay, so the commonly used design is the cross-sectional design. Okay, so this study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. So you see, the first thing I mentioned is that define what research design means. Then you talk about the relevance of research design in research. Okay, then the next thing is state your design. So for example, those who will be doing quantitative research, you go like, this study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. Okay, this study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. Now, this statement is for those who will be writing quantitative projects. Okay, this study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. Then now, the next sentence, you define what descriptive cross-sectional design is. You give a definition. Okay, then within the definition, make sure you highlight on some of the characteristics of that design. Okay, then you go further to also define what quantitative approach to data collection means. Then there should be a sentence where you highlight on the reason why you adapted quantitative approach to data collection. Is that okay? So you make a statement like, so after you've defined the research design, then you give the importance of research design in project writing or project work or research. Then you go, this study, so for those writing quantitative studies, this study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. This study adapted a descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection to assess the knowledge of nurses, the knowledge, attitude and practices of nurses toward infection prevention and control at Kolebu Teaching Hospital. There's an example. Is that okay? Great. Then now the next sentence, we now define what descriptive cross-sectional design is. Now, after defining what descriptive cross-sectional design is, the next thing you do is also define what quantitative approach to data collection is and give the reasons why you adopted descriptive cross-sectional design and quantitative approach to data collection. The reasons why you adapted that for your study. Okay, more like the importance of those designs and methods. Is that okay? Great. So basically that is it. So if you are writing a quantitative study, this is how you start. First of all, define what research design is. Define what research design is. And then another sentence, you give the importance of research design. Then now you move on to the next sentence. The next sentence, you are going to tell us what design you adapted. So you go like, this study employed or this study adapted descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection to assess the knowledge of nurses on infection prevention and control at Kolebu Teaching Hospital. You see how it goes. Then now in your next sentence, okay, now define what descriptive cross-sectional design is and give the its importance or advantages. Then the next sentence, you also define what quantitative approach to data collection is. Then you give the advantages. Then now the last sentence, you tell us the reason why you employed or you adapted those designs in the last sentence. Then you are done with the research design. Okay, now let's focus now on those who will be writing on qualitative studies, those who will be doing qualitative studies. Now, the same thing. First, define research design. You define research design. Okay, so you give a very good definition of research design, then you reference. Then now you state the importance of research design in research or in proposals or in project works. Okay, you give a very good definition, then you give advantages of or the relevance of research design. Then now in the next sentence, now you go like, this study employed descriptive exploratory design. This study employed descriptive exploratory design. This study employed descriptive exploratory design using qualitative approach to data collection. This study employed descriptive exploratory design using qualitative approach to data collection. Or you can simply say that this study employed exploratory design using qualitative approach to data collection. This study employed qualitative design using qualitative. This study employed exploratory design using qualitative approach to data collection to assess the experiences of nurses regarding infection prevention and control. Then now, in your next sentence, you now define what exploratory research design means. You define exploratory research design. Then you give the advantages, the characteristics and advantages. Then now in your next sentence, you now define what qualitative approach to data collection means. Then you give the advantages. Then in your last sentence, tell us the reason why in your study you adapted exploratory research design and qualitative approach to data collection. As simple as that. Okay, now let's focus on those who will be writing on mixed method studies. Mixed method studies. How are you going to write the research design section? Mixed method study. How are you going to write the research design section in a mixed method study? Now, in mixed method study, this is how you go. The same thing. First of all, define research design. Give a very good definition of research design. Okay, good. Then you give the advantages of research design. Okay, now the next thing that you are going to do is that you go like, this study employed descriptive cross-sectional design using mixed method approach to data collection. Okay, this study adapted descriptive cross-sectional design using mixed method approach to data collection. That is how you go about it. So this study employed a descriptive cross-sectional design using mixed method approach to data collection. This study employed a descriptive cross-sectional design using mixed method approach to data collection. Simple as that. Is that okay? Great. Then now, the next sentence, you now define what descriptive cross-sectional design means. Now, then you now define what descriptive cross-sectional design means. You give some of the characteristics and the advantages. Then now, in the next sentence, you now also define what mixed method approach to data collection means. Then now, after defining or mixed method approach to data collection, what it means, give the advantages of mixed method approach and the characteristics. Then in the last sentence, let us know the reason why in your study you are adapting the mixed method approach to data collection. Let us know the advantages. That's the last sentence. Is that okay? And this is how you write the research design section in chapter 3 or the methodology section of project works. So first of all, you give a very good definition of research design. Okay, now after defining research design, the next thing you have to do, so you give a good definition of research design. After defining research design, the next thing you do is that you give some relevance or some its significance in research method. You give its significance in research method. Now, after giving the significance, the next thing you are supposed to do is that you have to let us now know the design you are adapting. So you go like, so if you are writing quantitative study, you go like, this study adapted quantitative approach to data collection. This study adapted quantitative approach to data collection. This study, you can also say this study employed descriptive cross-sectional design. This study employed descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. This study employed descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. Okay, good. Then now the next sentence, or sometimes some people will go like this study employed descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection to assess the knowledge of nurses on infection prevention and control at Kolebu Teaching Hospital, for example. Then now the next sentence, you now let us know the meaning of descriptive cross-sectional design and give some characteristics and its importance. Then the following sentence, the next sentence, you will now tell us explain what quantitative approach to data collection means. Then in your last sentence, okay, give us the reason why you are adapting descriptive cross-sectional design and then quantitative approach to data collection. Then you are done with the research design. You do the same thing when you are doing exploratory or qualitative. So for example, qualitative, you define research design, the significance. The next sentence, this study employed descriptive exploratory design using qualitative approach to data collection, or this study employed exploratory research design using qualitative approach to data collection. Then you now define what exploratory research design is, the characteristics and advantages. Then the next, you define what qualitative approach to data collection means, the advantages. Then lastly, you tell us the reason why your study, okay, you adapted exploratory research design and quantitative approach to data collection. This is how you write the research design section in actual project works and then in proposals. But then remember, if you are writing a proposal, you have to go this way. If you are writing a proposal, you go like, okay, this study. So you first of all have to define research design. Then you give the advantages or its relevance in research space. Then now the next thing, this study will employ descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection. This study would employ descriptive cross-sectional design using quantitative approach to data collection, okay, to assess the knowledge of nurses regarding infection prevention and control at Mamprobi District Hospital. Okay, then now you give the definition. You now define what descriptive cross-sectional design means. Then now you tell us the meaning of quantitative approach to data collection, and then you also add some advantages of that approach to data collection. Then lastly, you tell us why your study it is good to adopt or use that design, the descriptive cross-sectional design and the quantitative approach to data collection. Then you end there. Then you are done. The same thing for exploratory. If you are writing a qualitative study, you start by defining what research design means. So you give a very good definition of research design. Now, after defining research design, the next thing you are going to do is that you tell us the next thing you are going to do is you go like, this study adapted exploratory research design using qualitative approach to data collection, okay, to explore the experiences of nurses regarding legal issues in nursing. That is a typical example. Is that okay? Then now you define what exploratory research design means, the characteristics. Then you define or explain what qualitative approach to data collection also means. Then now the next thing you do is that you tell us the reason why your study, the variables that you are measuring, it is very important or best fit for you to use that design. Then you are done with the research design section. Now let's talk about the study area, the study site, and the study setting. The study area, the study site, and the study setting. Now, when we say study area, let's begin with study area. When we say study area actually refers to the broader geographic, administrative, or ecological region where the study is conducted or where a research is conducted. Okay, so study area refers to the broader geographic, administrative, or ecological region where a study is conducted. Is that okay? Now, it represents the setting or the domain from which study participants are drawn. A study area could be a district, it could be a city, or it could be a region. Okay, but usually you have to narrow it down to the district, or at large you can do the city, but most of the time go down to the district. Now, when we move forward, I would explain the difference between the study area and study site. Okay, now the study area also provides contextual background such as population size, the demographics, the infrastructure, and the environment. It helps defines the sampling frame and affect external validity, that is generalizability of the findings. Now, it is important for you to note that some writers include location map or area map, okay, to visually show where the study area is situated. Okay, for example, for and addition to this explanation, for those of you who will be writing community-based studies, in describing the study area, include major occupations like the way of life of the residents or the people, the presence of schools, the presence of hospitals, the presence of very key market areas, or any other significant landmark. It could be a police station, or it could be any serious landmark. It could be a mall. It could be any significant landmark in that community. Okay. You also have to mention of key socioeconomic or cultural features relevant to the study. Okay. Good. Now let's quickly go through the study site. Then I will explain the differences between the two. Now, study sites is the specific location within the study area where the data collection or observations occurs. Examples: hospital ward, clinic, school, community center, or health post. This is where the operational work itself happens. Recruitment interviews occur, measurement of several variables, this is where they occur, and this is where the sampling to form part of participants actually takes place. In fact, it forms the eternal validity by maintaining control, consistency, and minimizing bias. Now, for those of you who will be doing facility-based studies, you have to describe, for example, hospital-based studies. You should describe the various departments within that facility. If it is a school and there are various departments, describe the various, try and hint on the various departments. If it's a hospital, you are conducting the study and they have various departments, try and highlight some of the departments in your description. Is that okay? The department and what they do in those departments. Any other resources that they have in that facility, try and talk about it. Or any other services that are provided. Okay, try and talk about it, especially services that are relevant or related to the study you are conducting. You try and give us the staff composition. You are doing your study in a school. Try and give us the staff composition. Is that okay? The available resources in the school. Are there any library? Any available resource in the school. Any unique thing in the school, you have to talk about it. Any special feature in that facility that makes it unique or that makes it stand out, you have to talk about it. Okay. And also, we can have some studies that you may have multiple study sites. For example, you can be doing a research that you'll be using selected hospitals. Is that okay? You can do a research that you'll be using selected hospitals. Or you can do a research that you conducted within a single health facility. Is that okay? Great. Now let's look at the difference between the study area and then the study site. So for example, let's use a hospital like Kolebu Teaching Hospital as a case study or an example. For example, you are conducting a facility-based study at Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Now, the Kolebu Teaching Hospital itself is the study site. And then the district where Kolebu Teaching Hospital is located is the study area. Okay, so like I said earlier, the study area is the broader geographic, administrative, or ecological region where the study is conducted. So another example, if you are conducting a research at Rich Hospital, okay, or Greater Accra Regional Hospital. The Greater Accra Regional Hospital itself is the study site. That is where the actual data collection will take place. But then the district where Greater Accra Regional Hospital is located becomes the study area. Okay, so when you are describing the study area, we want you to actually describe the district where the facility is located. So in describing that district, at least talk about give us the population size of that district, the demographics, apart from the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, which other infrastructures are within that very area. Okay, good. Give a good, summary of the nature of the environment in that district. Is that okay? Great. And in the study area, sometimes you have to include a map. Okay, after writing the study area, it makes your work very nice, and people can just read the location just by looking at the map, the area map. Is that okay? Great. For those of you who will be writing on community-based studies, we'll be doing community-based studies. The study area is very important. At that level, you have to describe major occupations of the residents in that very area or the district. Okay, the various schools in that district, the various hospitals, marketplaces, any other significant landmark, you have to talk about it. However, the study site is the specific location within the study area. So you see, the study site is the actual place the research is going to be conducted. The data is going to be collected. Is that okay? That is the study site. Okay, great. So that's the difference between the study site and then the study area. That's the difference between the study site and the study area. Okay, now the advice I will give you is that, for example, you are writing a study, it's a facility-based study. Let's say you are conducting it at Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Now the study area, just describe the district where the hospital is located. So describe the district. Sometimes you can give the location, the geographical location of the area by giving some, the geographical location of the area. You can talk about the major occupation of the people within the district. You can talk about the various schools that are within that same district. You can make mention of some of the schools, the common occupation of the people. You can even give the distribution, the ethnic distribution of the people. Okay, the area, which people dominate the area. Is it Gans? Is it Akans? Is it Ashantis? Give the distribution if you want to. Okay, good. If there are key landmarks in the area like markets, places, if there are any, of any cultural, activity that is very common among the people in the district, you can talk about it when you are describing the study area. Now, when you come to the study site, okay, that is when you are coming to now describe Kolebu Teaching Hospital, the specific location where the study will be conducted. So that is where you are now coming to, talk about the Kolebu Teaching Hospital itself. Okay, now in talking about the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, okay, you can start by letting us know. You can start by letting us know where the Kolebu Teaching Hospital is located, specifically within the district. Now, you also have to make sure you talk about the various departments within the facility. Okay, that's for those doing hospital or facility-based studies. The various departments or institutional-based studies. The various departments. If it is a school, talk about the various departments. If there are any other special units within the school, talk about it, like library, resources, any game centers, any other resource. If there are any key activities that goes on in the school, services provided. If it's a hospital based, the services provided by the hospital, talk about it. Give the staff strength of the facility or the institution. If it is a hospital, at least give the staff strength. Or if it's a particular department within the hospital, at least talk about. If you can't even give the staff strength of the entire department, at least of the entire hospital, at least the department you want to conduct your study, you should be able to give us the staff strength. Okay, someone will say, are we going to get all this information online? Sometimes no. Sometimes you have to make contact to the facility, or you go to the facility to get those informations, or you contact someone in the facility to get those informations. Please, the advice I'll give you is that the study area, you can omit the map. Then the study site, you give the map. Okay, good. Because you shouldn't give the map for the study area at the same time the map for the studies. Another thing you can do is you can do a combine. So under the study site, you can have a broad diagram where you have the map of the study area and then the map of the study site, all under the study site. Is that okay? That is also another style that you can use. Is that okay? Great. So that is it for the study area and study site. Now, there are times that you'll be reading articles instead of study area and study site. You see the study setting is the same thing. Okay, good. Usually in most articles, you wouldn't see study site. You would usually see study setting. Okay, study setting more like a description of both the study area and the study site. Okay, so study setting refers to the environment and the context in which the study is conducted, including the physical, institutional, social, or experimental surroundings. It's used in journals and reports to help readers understand how the context or the environment may influence the study result. Example, hospitals versus community, laboratory versus field. Especially relevant when contextual factors such as social norms, facility resources, or geographic and ecological conditions can affect outcomes. The study setting provides a clear picture of where and under what circumstance the study took place, helping readers assess the study's applicability. The term study setting and study sites are sometimes used interchangeably, though study sites often refers to the specific physical location, while study setting emphasizes the broader context and environment of that location. Now, the summary. The study area provides the broader geographical and contextual background that frames the entire research. Now, the study site identifies the specific location or locations within that area where the data collection or the observation takes place. Now, the study setting describes the environmental and institutional context in which the research occurs. So, for example, for those of you who will be writing, your study site is selected health facilities in Greater Accra. That means that your study area, you should focus on describing the city, not a district. So, for example, you are doing a study, you are using selected senior high schools. One school is somewhere at Medina, one school is somewhere at let's say Dansoman, another school is somewhere at, let's say, Soto. Now, in describing the study area, describe the city, that is Greater Accra. Just give a summary description of the city. Then, under the study sites, at least you highlight on the description of the various schools, or if it is 2 schools you are using, you highlight on the description of the various schools. Talk about some of the facilities, their staff strengths. Oh, do you get it? Good. Now, if you are doing a facility-based study, like a hospital-based study, in selected hospitals or selected health facilities, is that okay? Selected health facilities. Now, what you are supposed to do is that in the selected health facilities, for one facility is located somewhere at, let's say, Medina. Another facility is located somewhere at, let's say, Soto. Now, describe, instead of the study area, instead of giving the study area for the district, another thing you can do, you can describe the district where each of these facilities are located, or broadly, you can just describe the city instead of the districts. Okay, but the recommended is the districts. Okay, so you can describe the districts in brief, the district where these selected facilities are located before you come to the study sites. Then under the study sites, you now describe the various hospitals that you use. So if you are using 2 hospitals, you now describe the various hospitals. Okay, so you can refer to these articles, okay, and see how they go about describing the study area, the study site, and the study setting. Okay, so these are samples that I've kept in the slide for you to make reference to on how, and these are current papers on how to describe the study sites, the study area, and the study setting. Now let's move on to target population or study population. Target population. This is one of the areas that you have to cover in the methodology section of the chapter 3 of research projects. The target population or study population. Now, what is a target population? A target population refers to the entire group of people or units your research aims to draw conclusion about. A target population refers to the entire group of people or units your research aims to draw conclusions about. The entire group of people or units your research aims to draw conclusions about. Okay. Now, so when we say a target population, so for example, you want to do a study, you are using pregnant women. Basically, that is your target population. Is that okay? So if your population is pregnant women, the entire pregnant women at the antenatal clinic, that becomes your target population. Is that okay? Great. Now, what is a study population or accessible population? A study population or accessible population. A study population is the subset of the target population from which you can actually recruit or sample from. So when we say a study population, it's the subset of the target population from which you can actually recruit or sample. Okay, good. And mostly the study population is clearly defined by the population characteristics like the age range, the condition, the location, and the setting or it's reproducible. Okay, it is reproducible, the setting, so it is reproducible. Okay, so what that means is that the study population actually defines the population characteristics of the participants or the people that would, be part of the study. And that helps to make it reproducible. That's the meaning. Now, the sampling frame must map from the study population back to the target population. Now, specify the time frame of data collection. Use of a well-defined target or study improves generalizability or external validity of your findings. Now, in describing your study population or target population, you should be aware of bias. If your study population differs systematically from the target population, your results may not apply broadly. Okay. Again, for example, all women aged 18 to 49 years attend an antenatal clinic at SYZ Hospital in Accra during April to June 2025. So you could see that here, the target, women of that age in that region, women between the ages of 18 to 49 in that region. The study population is equal to those attending the clinic during the period. You see the difference? So the target population is all women aged 18 to 49 years. Okay, but here, that's the target. Women of that age in that region. So all women. So you see, so the target population is all women between the ages of 18 to 49 years. But the study population itself would be those attending the clinic during that period. Do you get it? That's the difference between so for example, you are doing a study among pregnant, you want to do a study among pregnant women. Is that okay? That will be a target population. But the study population may be maybe pregnant women attending antenatal at Kolebu Teaching Hospital during the study period. So if a pregnant woman is not even visiting the antenatal clinic of Kolebu, that woman does not fall within the study population. And even if a pregnant woman is even visiting the antenatal clinic at Kolebu, but is not visiting within the time period for the study, that woman will still not fall within the study population. That is the difference. Okay, so the target population is the entire group of people or units your research aims to draw conclusions about. Now, the study population or the accessible population, the subset of the target population from which you can actually recruit or sample. Is that okay? Great. So that's the difference between. Now, usually under the target population or study population, we have what we call the inclusion criteria and then the exclusion criteria. The inclusion criteria and then the exclusion criteria. Now, what is inclusion criteria? Inclusion criteria refers to the characteristics that must be present for an individual or a unit to be eligible for the study. Inclusion criteria refers to the characteristics that must be present for an individual or a unit to be eligible for the study. Now, what is an exclusion criteria? Exclusion criteria refers to the characteristics that disqualifies otherwise eligible participants from participating in a study. Now, why is inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria important? For example, for exclusion criteria are not simply, one thing you should notice that exclusion criteria are not simply the direct opposite of the exclusion criteria. Okay, they often arise because of, let's say, safety issues or measurements or confounding issues in research. Is that okay? Now, write both inclusion and exclusion criteria as clear and specific statements that can be easily understood and applied consistently by the recruitment team. For example, let's look at inclusion criteria. Age 18 to 60 years, diagnosis of hypertension, consented to participate. Okay, examples of exclusion criteria: someone taking immunosuppressive drugs, non-resident of the study district, pregnancy if the intervention is not studied in pregnancy. Is that okay? Good. So inclusion or exclusion criteria helps to ensure eternal validity, reducing confounding, and external validity by defining who findings can be applied to. Okay, good. Because external validity is about generalizability. Inclusion criteria can give us an idea which specific category of people we can sort of, apply the findings to. Okay, good. So inclusion and exclusion criteria can help ensure internal validity and external validity. Okay, now document criteria before recruitment begins and report your method so that readers or journals or ethics committees see who was excluded and why they were excluded. Okay, so we usually capture the inclusion and exclusion criteria under the target or the study population section. So in most academic work, after the study population, then under it we have inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. Okay, great. So you can make reference to these articles over here and see how they've written their inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. Now, the next thing we are going to look at is the sample and sample size calculation. The sample and sample size calculation. In some literatures, they call it the sample and sample size determination. The sample and sample size determination. Now, what is a sample? A sample is a subset of the population selected to participate in a study. A sample is the subset. So, for example, like we said, we have you remember I mentioned that we have a target population and we have a steady population. The steady population is actually the population that you would actually be collecting data from. Okay, that's the steady population. Okay, good. That is what we call the steady population. Okay, so the steady population is actually the population you'll be collecting the data from. So the steady population is more like a subset of the target population. You get the steady population from. So for example, you want to do a study among pregnant women. The pregnant women in general is a target population. Okay, but the steady population can be pregnant women between the ages of, or women between the ages of 18 to 49 years. Okay, who were visiting, the antenatal clinic during your study period. Then that becomes a steady population. Okay, so you realize that after defining your study population, not all pregnant women would fall within the domain of your study population. So we get a steady population from the target population. Okay, now from your so if you look at the target population, within the target population, that is where you draw your sample. Okay, so within your target, so that's what it means. You draw your sample from the target population, or you draw your sample from the steady population. That is what it means. It's the same thing. Now, a sample size. What is a sample size? Sample size is the number of subjects or elements included in the study. A sample size is the number of subjects or elements included in the study. What is the importance? Now, it ensures findings are representative of the target population. It enhances accuracy, reliability, and validity of results. It helps manage resources, time, cost, personnel. It prevents bias from too small or too large samples. It determines the statistical power to detect true effects. Okay, great. Now, let's look at sample size determination. We have two formulas for sample size determination. Two formulas. The first one is the YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination. And then we have the Cochrane formula for sample size determination. Now, these two formulas are used when you are writing quantitative study. So for all those who be writing quantitative study, you need these two formulas. Okay, the YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination, and then Cochrane formula for sample size determination. Pay attention. In this video, I would explain clearly how to use these two formulas. The YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination and the Cochrane formula for sample size determination. Now, we use the YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination when the population size is known. So you are going to conduct a study among nurses at maybe the accident and emergency department of Kolebu Teaching Hospital, and you are sure that you know the population size, the exact population size. You know the population size, which is the N. In such a situation, you use the YAMANE'S formula. Now, you are going to do a study among nurses at Kolebu Teaching Hospital, maybe the medical department. You do not have the specific population size. You can't use the YAMANE'S formula. You have to use the Cochrane formula. Okay, as part of this video, I'll take my time to explain the YAMANE'S formula and then the Cochrane formula for sample size determination for quantitative research. Okay, so that should tell you that if you are writing a proposal or an actual project work for a quantitative research, you need to cover sample size determination. You will be using one of these formulas, either the YAMANE'S formula or the Cochrane formula. Now, you use the YAMANE'S formula when you know the sample size. You use the Cochrane formula when you have no idea of the population size, the N. Now let's begin with the YAMANE'S formula. Now remember, the condition to use the YAMANE'S formula is when the population you want to study, the study population, you know the N, the population size. So for example, you are going to conduct a study among residents in Soweto. You can only use the YAMANE'S formula when you know the population size, N. The mistake a lot of people make in using the YAMANE'S formula is there are times they get the N wrong because the N is not from a relevant source. Remember, we do not use the YAMANE'S formula when you do not know the N or when you are not sure of the N. The N, the capital N, represents the population size. So you are conducting a study among nurses at the emergency department of Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Now, before you can use the YAMANE'S formula, you need to know the total number of nurses, the accurate total number of nurses working at the emergency department of Kolebu Teaching Hospital. You want to conduct a study among pregnant women among pregnant women visiting the antenatal department of, let's say, Dansuman Polyclinic. Now, first of all, you have to be able to have an idea of, let's say, in a space of a month or in a space of 4 weeks, how many pregnant women visit the facility. Then you can use that to know the N, or you can use that to represent the N. Then you give a description that you got the N from. Okay, so if there is a system in the facility to help you know the number of pregnant women that visits the antenatal clinic in a space of a month, then you can use that to represent the N. Other than that, you can't use the YAMANE'S formula. You only use the YAMANE'S formula when you are sure and you know the accurate total number of the population, okay, within the site where you are conducting the study or within the context of the study. Now, what is the YAMANE'S formula? The YAMANE'S formula states that N is equal to capital N all over 1 plus capital N into bracket E, close the bracket 2, where small n is equal to the required sample size. Capital N is equal to the total of finite population. E is the margin of error, usually 0.05 for 95% confidence level. Now, let's go over the formula again. So the formula, YAMANE'S formula states that small n is equal to capital N all over 1 plus capital N, close the bracket E, open the bracket E, close the bracket, raise the power 2, where n is equal to the required sample size. Capital N is equal to the total of finite population. Small e is equal to margin of error, usually 0.05 for 95% confidence level. For the last time, the YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination is equal to small n is equal to capital N all over 1 plus capital N, open the bracket, small e, close the bracket, raise the power 2, where small n is the required sample size you are calculating for. Capital N is equal to the total of finite population. E is equal to margin of error into bracket, usually 0.05 for 95% confidence level. Okay, now when to use the YAMANE'S formula? When the population size N is known and definite. When do we use YAMANE'S formula? When the population size capital N is known and definite. Now, common in institutional or community-based surveys, especially when you are doing a community-based study, you are doing an institutional-based study, maybe among teachers, among nurses, among students, and you can go to the facility and get the specific population size, then the best formula to use is YAMANE'S formula. Okay, good. So, for example, let's say we are doing a study among nurses at a particular department. The total number of nurses N is 500. So you write N is equal to 500, or the total number of nurses at the department, working at the department, is 500. Then your E, all the time, you use 95% confidence interval. If you are using 95% confidence interval, your margin of error is 0.05. In using, or the significant level is 0.05. So all the time, we use 95% confidence interval. Please remember it. Mostly in research, in sample size determination, all the time, we use 95% confidence level. Okay. And that will give you a significant level of 0.05. So the E represents the significant level or margin of error 0.05. Okay. Now the formula. So let's put that into the formula, interpolate that into the formula. So small n is equal to 500 all over 1 plus 500 into bracket 0. E is 0.05. So into bracket 0.05, close the bracket, raise the power 2. When you compute this, that will give you 222. Therefore, the sample size is 222. Is that okay? The sample size is 222. Okay, good. So remember, we use the Yamane formula for sample size determination when you are sure of the population size n and is definite. Okay, so the formula states that small n is equal to capital N all over 1 plus capital N into bracket E, close the bracket, raise the power 2. Okay, and I can ask you a question on this in exams, in research methods. Okay, I can give you a scenario and ask you to calculate for the sample size. Okay, now let's do the Cochrane formula for sample size determination. Okay, now remember, let me add another detail. Now, there are times that you want to use Yamane's formula, but eventually the sample size you are getting is very large. Sometimes it is advisable, if you are getting a very large sample size, for example, you want to do a study among nurses or among residents in a certain community. Now, because the N you are getting is very large, the final sample size eventually would be higher. Okay, in such a situation, you can opt for Cochrane formula. Okay, we do not only use the Cochrane formula when you don't know the sample size N. At times, the Cochrane formula would also be advisable in a larger population. So it is applied when the population size is large or unknown. Two things. So the two reasons why we use Cochrane formula. We use Cochrane formula when the population size is large or unknown. You have to note this down. You use the Cochrane formula for two reasons. When the sample size is large, because if the sample size for a particular population is very large and you want to use Yamane's formula, sometimes if the population size is very large, that will mean that the sample size too will definitely be large. In such a situation, go in for the Cochrane formula. Okay. Cochrane formula is also commonly used in epidemiological knowledge and attitude-based studies. Is that okay? Now, what is the Cochrane formula? N is equal to Z squared multiplied by P into bracket 1 minus P all over D squared, where small n is the required sample size. Z is equal to the Z score for the desired confidence level. Commonly, we use 1.96 for 95% confidence level. P is equal to the estimated proportion, that is the prevalence from the previous or similar study. D is equal to the desired precision or the margin of error. Let's go over the formula again. So the Cochrane formula is equal to N is equal to Z squared, Z raised the power 2 multiplied by P into bracket 1 minus P, close the bracket, all over D squared, where N, small n, is the required sample size. Z is the Z score for desired confidence level. So if the confidence level is 95%, the Z score is 1.96 for 95% confidence level. P is equal to estimated proportion into bracket prevalence from a previous or similar study. D is equal to the desired precision or margin of error. Let's go over the Cochrane formula for the last time. N is equal to Z squared multiplied by P into bracket 1 minus P, close the bracket, all over D squared, where N is the required sample size, Z is the Z-score for desired confidence level. For 95% confidence level, the Z-score is 1.96. P is the estimated proportion into bracket the prevalence from previous or similar study. D is the desired precision or margin of error. Now, when do we use the Cochrane formula? We use the Cochrane formula when the population size is very large. Why? If the population size is very large and you use the YAMANE'S formula, it's very likely the sample size will be higher or larger. We also use the Cochrane formula when the population capital N is unknown. Because, if capital N is unknown, you are not sure of the capital N, you can't use the YAMANE'S formula. You can only use the YAMANE'S formula when you know the capital N. Is that okay? So these are the two formulas that you can use. Now, what's the secret to using the Cochrane formula? So, for example, you want to conduct a study among nurses. Okay, among nurses at, let's say, Asha Polyclinic. You want to study knowledge of nurses regarding ethical and legal issues in nursing. Okay, now the facility that you are not sure of the sample size, the population size N. You are doing the study among nurses. You are not sure of the population size N. In such a situation, you can't use the YAMANE'S formula. So you have to use the Cochrane formula. How are you going to use the Cochrane formula? You have to look for a similar study conducted among nurses. It could be in a different country. So you look for a similar study conducted among nurses where they explored any of your independent variables. So in this situation, knowledge and practices of nurses regarding ethical and legal issues. So I'll go and look for a study where among nurses on the same subjects, ethical and legal issues. Okay, then I'll look for the prevalence, the knowledge, or the proportion of the knowledge. So for example, I'll go to that study and go and check their results. Okay, the knowledge of nurses on ethical issues, what was the percentage? Then maybe if the study, the result says that 48% of the nurses, had good knowledge of, let's say, ethical and legal issues, then I will use that percentage, that prevalence, we call it proportion. I will use that proportion and come and use it as my P. Is that okay? So if, for example, in that study, it could be a different country, maybe they found out that 40% of the nurses had good knowledge, I will use that 40%. So it means that my P will be 40 over 100. Okay, and that will be more like 0.40, 0.40 or 0.4. Okay, then my 1 minus P will be 1 minus 0.4. Do you get it? That's how we do that calculation. Okay, great. So let's use an example. So for example, look at the Cochrane formula. So for example, a researcher wants to determine the sample size for a study on nurses' knowledge on hand hygiene practices. Now, previous study found that 65%. Okay, and 65% means that, so previous study found that 65% of the nurses had good knowledge. Okay, good. So if 65% of the nurses had good knowledge, it means the proportion P is 0.65. 65% means 65 over 100, and that's 0.65 in terms of proportion. Okay, so meaning the P is 0.65, and then the 1 minus P is 1 minus 0.65. Then you go and put that into the formula. Now, if you are using the Cochrane formula all the time, the confidence level you have to use is 95% confidence level, and the Z-score for 95% confidence level is 1.96. Okay, so the significant level or the error margin, the D will be 0.05. The D will be 0.05. The D will be 0.05. Okay, another example. A study aims to assess exclusive breastfeeding among mothers in the district. Now, once you are doing exclusive breastfeeding among mothers in the district, maybe the prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding, okay, or the practices of exclusive breastfeeding, go and look for another study where they did something on practices and find out the percentage of pregnant women that were practicing the exclusive breastfeeding. Then that percentage, you use that percentage. So an example can be, let's say you are doing a study, knowledge, attitude, and practices. Okay, you can go and find, if you want to use the Cochrane formula, go and find the prevalence, the proportion of the knowledge on that same subject you are studying from a different study, and go to their results and check their percentage, the proportion of the knowledge. If the proportion of the knowledge is 50%, then it means that the proportion P is what? Is 0.50. Then you use that percentage, the 0.50, to go and put it into the Cochrane formula. You use a z-score of 1.96 for confidence level of 95%. Then you use that to do your calculation. Is that okay? In the Cochrane's formula. Okay. And if you, in Cochrane's formula calculation, that study that you adapted the proportion from, you have to reference that study in the description. Remember, you should reference that study and give the citation of that study under your sample size description or your sample size determination description. It's very important. Is that okay? Great. So that is it for the sample size determination. So we have two sample size determinations for quantitative study. Two common sample size determination for quantitative study. YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination. Cochrane formula for sample size determination. YAMANE formula for sample size determination. Cochrane formula for sample size determination. Okay. Now with the YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination, the YAMANE'S formula for sample size determination, n, small n is equal to capital N all over 1 minus capital N into bracket E, close the bracket, squared, where small n is the required sample size, capital N is the total or finite population, small e is the margin of error, usually 0.05 for 95% confidence interval. Now, when to use the YAMANE'S formula? When the population size, capital N, is known and definite, common in institutional or community-based surveys. Example, nurses in a hospital, students in a school. If n is equal to 500, for this an example. So let's say you are going to do a study. You found out that the n, capital N, the population size is 500. All the time, use error margin of 0.05 in research. Error margin of 0.05. So E all the time is 0.05. So we are going to have small n is equal to 500 all over 1 plus 500 into bracket 0.05, close the bracket, squared. Now learn how to compute this on a scientific calculator, because sometimes, most of the time, the error a lot of students or writers commit is how to compute it. They get the final computation wrong, and at the end of the sample size, the final answer is going to be wrong. Then therefore the sample size is 222. Now the Cochrane formula. We use the Cochrane formula in a situation where, if you are supposed to, you are to use the YAMANE'S formula, the sample size will be very large. That is because if the population size n, capital N, is large, sample size will be large. In such a situation, consider the Cochrane formula. Okay, so there are two reasons you can use Cochrane formula: when the population size is large or when the population size is unknown. There are two reasons for using the Cochrane formula: when the sample size is large and when the population size is large and the population size is unknown. When the population size is large or the population size is unknown. Okay, what is the formula? Small n is equal to z squared times p into bracket 1 minus p, close the bracket, all over d squared, where small n is the required sample size. Z is the z-score for the desired confidence level. Usually or commonly we use the 1.96 for 95% confidence level. P is equal to the estimated proportion into bracket the prevalence from a previous or similar study. D is the desired precision or margin of error. Okay, all right. So that is it for sample size determination. Okay, now let's look at sample size determination in qualitative research. Sample size determination in qualitative research. Now, in qualitative research, sample size determination in qualitative study focuses on depth of understanding rather than numerical representation. Unlike quantitative research, which uses statistical formulas like the Cochrane formula or the YAMANE'S formula, qualitative research aims to explore meanings, experiences, or perceptions in detail. Now, the key characteristics is that in sample size determination for qualitative research, it is non-statistical. It uses non-statistical approach. You see over here, we perform some statistical calculations, and these are inferences. Is that okay? But in qualitative research sample size determination, non-statistical approach, okay, the emphasis is on information richness, not sample, quantity. Now, the other thing is flexible and iterative. Is flexible and iterative. The sample may evolve as data collection proceeds. The sample evolves as data collection proceeds. Okay, again, it is purposeful selection. What does that mean? Participants are chosen based on their ability to provide relevant and in-depth information about the phenomena under study. Let's look at types of qualitative study, and the appropriate sample sizes. Now for small and manageable, often you can do between 10 to 30 participants depending on the study design. Okay, so different quantitative studies and then the sample sizes to you can consider. If you are doing a phenomenological study, you can consider between 6 to 10 participants. You are doing a case study, you can consider 4 to 10 participants. You are doing a grounded theory, 20 to 30 participants. Focus group discussion, 6 to 12 participants per group. Now, the difference is that quantitative seek generalization. Sample size is because of that sample size is determined statistically. Qualitative seeks understanding. So sample size is determined conceptually through data saturation. Okay, now what is data saturation in research or data saturation in qualitative research sample size determination? Now, data saturation is the point during qualitative data collection when no new information, themes, or insights emerge from additional interviews or observations. Now, when is data saturation achieved? Data saturation is achieved after repeated themes and patterns begin to recur across participants. It occurs when additional data no longer contributes new understanding to the research questions. Now, the number of participants required depends on the study design and complexity, diversity of the participants, quality and depth of data collected. Now, significance of data saturation. It ensures completeness, credibility, and trustworthiness of findings. It enhances validity and rigor of qualitative results. It prevents unnecessary or redundant data collection once adequate insight is reached. In most qualitative studies, data saturation is typically achieved between 10 to 30 participants, depending on the study design, the topic complexity, data richness. For focused phenomenological or case studies, saturation may occur with as few as 6 to 12 participants. Now, that is basically how we determine sample size in qualitative study. We use data saturation. Okay, so unlike the quantitative research, sample size determination where we use statistical tools or statistical methods, over here it's non-statistical. That is one characteristics, and you should know the characteristics of qualitative sample size determination: non-statistical, flexible and iterative, purposeful selection. Okay, so the data saturation is the point during qualitative data collection when no new information, themes, or insights emerged from additional interviews or observation. That is when, so in qualitative study, as you are doing the interviews, when you realize that the answers that are coming, they are repetitive answers, you already have those information. That point, you have to consider, ending the study or ending the interviews. Okay, so data saturation is the point during qualitative data collection when no new information, teams, or insights emerge from additional interviews or observations. Is that okay? Okay, so over here we give you some types of qualitative studies and the estimated sample size you can consider or you should expect to attain a data saturation. So for phenomenology, studies 6 to 10 participants. For case study, 4 to 10 participants. Grounded theory, 20 to 30 participants. Focus groups, 6 to 12 participants per group. Difference from quantitative studies. Okay, because you see, quantitative studies seeks generalization. That's why sample size is determined statistically. But qualitative study actually want to understand certain phenomena, certain concepts. Okay, so sample size is determined contextually through conceptually through data saturation. Okay, so that is it for you. Can make reference to the papers here. Okay, a qualitative study of the perception of quality of free maternal health care policy among primary health care providers in Ghana. A qualitative study exploring enablers and barriers in. So you can make reference to these papers and see how you have to write the sample size determination in an article or in an academic work. Make reference to these papers. They do the description very nice. Then you can take inspiration from there. Is that okay? So these papers are all qualitative study. You can make reference to them and see how they've done the sample size determination. Now, data collection tools in research. Data collection tools in research. Data collection tools in research. All right. So let's look at data collection tools in research.